The council chamber was in chaos. A dozen species argued over each other, their voices filled with anger, fear, and frustration. A new report had just come in. Asterisk, asterisk, another planet had fallen. Asterisk, asterisk, another world stripped bare. Its biosphere devoured. Its cities, if any had existed, now nothing more than dust beneath the chitinous tide. The Zyrex swarm had spread again. A towering reptilian senator slammed his clawed fist against the table. We cannot keep losing worlds at this rate. They breed faster than we can contain them. Containment is impossible. A pale, luminous-skinned diplomat countered. They are mindless. There is no diplomacy, no reason. They consume. That is their nature. And yet we refuse to consider the one solution that could end this forever. Another voice muttered. Silence fell. It was an unspoken line, a forbidden thought. Mass sterilization, genocide. The word itself sickened them. For centuries, the Galactic Council had followed a strict code. No species, no matter how destructive, should ever be deliberately wiped out. War was fought, yes, but extermination? That was barbaric. That was something their ancestors had abandoned. And yet here they were, watching helplessly as world after world fell to an enemy that could not be reasoned with. Then the humans spoke. The Terran envoy had been silent throughout the debate. They sat calmly, hands folded, observing the arguments with an air of quiet contemplation. When they finally did speak, their words cut through the noise like a knife. So why haven't you exterminated them yet? The room froze. Eyes turned toward the human representative, shock rippling across the chamber. The senator who had spoken first narrowed his reptilian eyes. We are not monsters, human. We do not commit genocide. The human tilted their head slightly. Genocide. They shook their head. That's not what we call it. A trembling diplomat pressed for clarification. Then what would you call it? The human leaned forward, their expression unreadable. Pest control. The chamber erupted into an uproar. Accusations of barbarism, of cruelty, of moral depravity filled the air. Some called it inhumane. Others called it reckless. The humans listened to it all without flinching, waiting for the noise to settle before responding. You asked for a solution, the Terran envoy said evenly. We're offering one. A member of the council scoffed. And what exactly does pest control mean to your species? The human exhaled, as if the answer was obvious. On Earth, when a species threatens the balance of an ecosystem, we eliminate it. Invasive species, viral outbreaks, predatory overpopulation, we don't negotiate with them. We handle them. Decisively. A horrified voice interjected. You're talking about eradication. Yes. The human's expression didn't change. Because that's what you do when something threatens everything you hold dear. The chamber fell silent again. For the first time in galactic history, the council found itself staring into an abyss it had never dared to look at before. And it wasn't the swarm that frightened them. It was the humans. The council was still reeling from the humans' words when the first reports came in. The Terran fleet had moved. There had been no further debate, no hesitation. The humans had been given authorization, and they had acted. The extermination had begun. Unlike the countless failed military campaigns against the swarm, this was not a war of attrition. There were no grand battles, no fleets clashing in the void. This was a purge. Humanity's first strike was biological. They had studied the Zyrex swarm with the cold precision of a scientist dissecting a parasite. Every weakness, every flaw in their genetic makeup had been mapped and analyzed. And then, those weaknesses were exploited. Tailored bioweapons were released onto infested worlds. Airborne pathogens that disrupted the swarm's ability to reproduce. Targeted toxins that attacked their neural clusters, causing them to collapse by the billions. Genetically engineered predators, bred in human laboratories, were introduced. Organisms designed for one purpose: to hunt and devour the swarm. Planetary atmospheres were altered. Climate manipulation technology made entire biospheres uninhabitable for the Zyrex. Some worlds were rendered too cold, freezing their fragile eggs before they could hatch. Others were flooded with chemical agents that corroded their exoskeletons, leaving them to die in droves. And humanity did not stop. There were no warnings, no ceasefires, no offers of surrender. The swarm had never shown mercy. The humans saw no reason to offer it. The council received transmissions from the few surviving Xyrix queens. Mindless as they were, they recognized annihilation. They shrieked across the void, sending distress signals to the stars. The humans did not respond. One by one, the swarm-infested planets went dark. The council watched in silence as the species that had once seemed unstoppable was undone in weeks, not by an endless war, not by desperate resistance, by extermination. The humans had solved the problem, and in doing so, they had forced the rest of the galaxy to confront a terrifying truth. Perhaps the swarm had never been the true threat. Perhaps it was the ones who had destroyed them. The war was over before most of the galaxy even realized it had begun. Where fleets had failed, where armies had been slaughtered, humanity had eradicated the swarm in a matter of weeks. Not a single Xyrix colony remained. No survivors. No remnants. Extinction. The council convened an emergency session, but for the first time in history, there was no crisis left to solve. The problem had been eliminated. Completely. And yet, there was no celebration. Some counselors were horrified. Had they just sanctioned genocide? Had they become complicit in an act that would stain galactic history forever? They had spent centuries preaching morality, restraint, and the sanctity of life. Yet when desperation came, they had turned to the humans. Others, however, saw something different. A terrible, undeniable truth. The humans had been right. Had they hesitated, had they clung to their outdated sense of ethics, the swarm would have continued to spread. The casualties would have numbered in the trillions. Entire species would have been wiped out, not just one. The uncomfortable reality settled over them. Was it truly genocide if the alternative was extinction? The council chambers echoed with debate. Some called for restrictions on human military power. Others argued that humanity had done what had to be done and should be trusted as the galaxy's new protectors. But beneath every argument, every desperate justification, lurked the same unspoken fear. The humans had approached the swarm's extermination with cold efficiency, no hesitation, no doubt. And if they ever decided that another species was just as much of a threat, who would stop them? They had watched humanity erase a nightmare that had plagued the stars for centuries. Now, the galaxy had to wonder. What happens if the humans decide that they are next? The swarm was gone, yet the silence it left behind was heavier than the destruction it had once wrought. Across the galaxy, species who had lived in terror now found themselves free. But with that freedom came a realization far more unsettling than the threat of the Xyrix itself. The humans had changed everything. For centuries, the Council had operated under a singular belief that diplomacy, restraint, and coexistence were the foundation of civilization, that even the worst conflicts could be tempered by ethics, that no species had the right to decide the fate of another. But now, that belief had been shattered. Planets once overrun by the swarm now lay silent, reclaimed by nature. A victory undeniable. But at what cost? Council members met in secret, their discussions hushed and uneasy. Some wanted to condemn humanity for what they had done, to ensure that such an act was never repeated. Others argued that without the humans, they would all be dead. One by one, species began making their decisions. Some sought closer ties with humanity, hoping to secure an alliance with the ones who had proven themselves capable of decisive action. Others moved to limit human influence, fearing that their so-called pest control doctrine might one day be turned upon them. Yet beneath all the diplomacy, all the discussions, a simple truth remained. No one could stop them. The humans had demonstrated something the rest of the galaxy had never dared to acknowledge. That sometimes survival wasn't about morality. That sometimes the only solution was the one no one was willing to speak aloud. For the first time in history, the Galactic Council understood that the true balance of power had shifted, and it no longer rested in their hands.